Hello all. This video is of my painting of a plaster cast of a horse. I thought since I'm giving you these assignments that I would show you how I go about doing them if it gives you ideas. There are several ways to do this, but this gives you some sort of overview and particular techniques that I use to help manage the similar assignments of what I've given. And the first part of this video, I'm going to be doing the first sitting, which is a in part subtractive umber sketch on a wet ground. So I've prepared it with a light tone and then wiped it off. And so I'll be able to, if need be, subtract back to the white of the canvas, in addition to additively using transparencies of burnt umber and solvent, thinner Gamsol to thin it down and make the paint travel. You can see I started with what I call an envelope, what's been called an envelope, which is the general sort of larger geometric binding shape in which the figure sits. So that helps me fit the figure in the on the canvas. It helps me get a general height to width idea of the figure, the height to width ratio, which is evolving at the beginning. You can see that I work relatively loose. I'm working pretty intuitively and doing a lot of eyeballing, but I use, on occasion, measurements, corrective measurements, to verify or go against what I've put down, and I can correct accordingly. I had a lot of trouble, you can see on the right side of the canvas. In my effort to cover quickly, I put a lot of Gamsol in with the paint, and it got very runny and blotchy, and I'm having to go over to change that ratio by adding more pigment to it, at times using a clean brush or a paper towel to sort of blot some of it off. This is an important step here too. You can see even a couple seconds prior, the texture of the umber that I was putting down was a lot more sort of scratchy and chaotic. And so I came in with a clean brush specifically to smooth out the texture of the umber so it looks like just totally ambient, cloudy, smooth, misty pigment. And that just helps me sort of calm my mind. It helps me recover the impression of the larger shapes. So that's actually just that consideration for surface turned out to be pretty important. You can see here I am starting to make a distinction between cast shadows and form shadows. Even just sharpening up the cast shadows created a much better impression of depth. You can see that I've scrawled some lines on. So in addition to this abstract light and shadow shape way of thinking, I come in and clean up the structure using lines to define the musculature, to correct the proportions. That's where I get a little more left brain, linear, in addition to abstract and perceptual. And I added some variety, subtractively created some variety within the light masses. You can see I've basically got four tones: a light middle tone, a shadow middle tone, some reference of the dark accent, which would be the black cloth or black box in the background, and a couple of sparse highlights. Once I get it to this four-tone range, I do go into the light mass, and I start to create my sort of gradients or subtle variations of value, because that's where I feel it is our job to illustrate form. It's the interplay of light and shadow, but then going beyond that, it's creating very careful value shifts within the light side of the form. This is the second day, so it's dried. And I'm going in, you can see my palette now is clipped to the top so you can see it. And I'm using burnt umber, white, and a tiny bit of cadmium orange to counteract the cooling quality of white. If you just mix white and burnt umber, it turns very gray. And I want the colors I'm putting down to be temperature-wise very similar to the transparent umber. Because I was disciplined about blocking in large shapes and making my drawing accurate in the first sitting, that gives me permission to then localize a bit more. So you can see as I mix up these delicate tones, I'm going mainly for the rib cage. I don't want to get too mired in it. So you can see I just hopped over to planes that really are closer in proximity to the light source and face more perpendicular to the light source and are therefore another step lighter. So that would be the chest plane and the forehead of the horse are just about lighter than any other area of the horse, with the exception of some of the rear haunches where those shelves of muscle faced leftward toward the light. You can see I'm restating the darkest dark. I've made reference of my lightest light, which helps me gauge my light middle tones and shadow middle tones in between the two. I'm doing a lot of more subtle carving now within areas that I think warrant it, which are those muscular masses on the front and back haunches, the delicate turn of the rib cage. I felt that the light and shadow broke a lot harsher on the face and created more of a two-tone graphic design, so I actually did not model as much within the head, which might be counterintuitive. Carving away shapes, trying to drop in transitional planes between the light and shadow rather than blending them, which is something that I'm trying to work on in my own work, is not to just fuzz and blend where the light and shadow meet, but actually mix up transitional planes of a certain value and carve them on, lay them on, and so that I'm essentially, I think of it like carving three-dimensionally. A lot of refining, putting in context of the background, which I had not paid proper attention to this point. Here I'm darkening up the terminator, the division of light and shadow, for a moment where the two meet. It's a bit of an optical illusion, but the terminator or core shadow can appear darker. And sometimes when you push the core shadow a little bit darker, it makes the ambient shadow tone look more like reflected light, and it just enhances the sense of form, meaning three-dimensionality. Tightening up the drawing always. As you sculpt with the paint, the drawing inevitably drifts. Putting in some sharp edges. I like my default mode to be generally soft-edged and then selectively harden up in 1, 2, or 3 places, and it just helps resolve what otherwise is a oil study. Putting in some of the context of the background and looking at how the figure is relatively lost or found relative to the background. It's moments of lostness, moments of foundness. And this is what I managed in several hours on my second sitting. I hope that helps. Ask questions if you have them.